On today's episode, we have week 5 waivers with fab bids. This is a big week. We have 4 teams on a bye this week. We have the Buccaneers, Chargers, Seahawks, and Browns. And we've had a ton of injuries. Guys like T. Higgins could be out for a while. Kenny Pickett has an MCL sprain. Pat Freiermuth has a hamstring injury. Javonte Williams injured his hip. Something's up with Devontae Adams' shoulder. Mike Evans has banged up his hamstring. A lot is happening, right? Some of these guys are on a bye, thankfully, so you give them a week off to rest and recuperate. But we need the waiver wire stat to fill in for some of these bye weeks and for some of these injuries. Aidan, even though the wire doesn't look super appetizing, it could be the difference between victory and defeat in week 5. As always, Aidan and I look at guys with sub 35% ownership across Sleeper. This week, I have a couple guys over 35. So for the third week in a row, I've kind of cheated, Aidan. You seem to stick to the assignment a little bit better than I do.
I cheated a bit this week.
Okay, you cheated
a bit this week. Yeah. I drew out some lines.
Okay, awesome. Before diving into our positions and the players that we are targeting, we're at a certain point in the season. We have 4 weeks of data, and it's okay to drop guys. We have a pretty good understanding of the guys that probably aren't going to be contributing anytime soon. And even if you cut them, we don't really feel that confident they're going to burn you in the long run because they're lacking true upside. I have 5 guys that I'm cutting right now if they're on my roster. I'm done with Joshua Kelly. Even if Austin Eckler misses time again, this guy's been dreadful. I want nothing to do with him. I'm dropping Antonio Gibson. I'm out. That's Brian Robinson's role. Samaje Perine, I'm out. You don't really look very good. You kind of look like this year's Chase Edmonds. Juju Smith-Schuster, I'm out. And Sky Moore, I'm cutting Sky Moore. Brandon Cooks and Treylon Burks, you are on the bubble, but I am not cutting bait quite yet with those two. So, I don't know. Any other guys you're dropping?
Add Josh Reynolds onto the list with the return of Jameson Williams. Didn't look very good last week and is probably not going to carve out much of a bigger role, but could be wrong. He might be 1 week away.
Okay. Yeah, I might hold on Reynolds, to be frank, but no, I get it. You know, Laporta looks like the clear 2. We're struggling to even get Jahmyr Gibbs involved. I don't know. I don't feel like I'd be married
on the
to
chopping
him.
block. He might not be out yet, but the guys you said, like I dropped Antonio Gibson in the league this week. I'm probably a week away from Samaje Perine, given that Javonte might be out a week, hopefully. Not hopefully, I hope he gets well soon. But for the sake of Samaje Perine potentially carving out a larger role this week, I'm probably holding on to Perine 1 more week.
We'll talk a little bit about why I'm comfortable dropping Perine when we get to the running back section here. And disappointing season for Sky Moore, to say the least.
Very.
We'll talk a little bit more about another guy that I'm targeting on the Chiefs when we get to wide receivers. All right, Aidan, you want to kick things off? I think we're going to start here with wide receivers, and I'm pulling up Sleeper here. I'm taking a look here at the trending players at each position here on Sleeper. But Aidan, looking at the landscape, looking first at wide receivers, who is one guy that you are targeting the most that's out there on the wire?
Yep, so I'm going to play by the rules to start. We're going to go by a guy that is rostered in just 6% of leagues, started by 1% of people, who exploded onto the scene last week for 26 points. That is none other than Michael Wilson of the Arizona Cardinals. This is a guy that we highlighted during the summer as a guy who could carve out a role pretty early in this offense, just given his skill set. He's the only large target, to put it nicely, in this offense. You've got Marquise Brown, you've got Rondale Moore, you've got Zach Ertz at the tight end position, but in terms of that wide receiver room, this guy is very unique, and it showed this week. He caught all 7 of his targets for 76 yards and 2 tutties. Looked like to have really good rapport with Josh Dobbs. Looks like the clear number 2 in this offense. And again, going back to his size, this is going to be the red zone target. You saw him getting targets in the red zone. He's going to be your jump ball guy. You're not throwing a jump ball to Marquise Brown, this is a guy that I think who's only going to get stronger as the year goes on. Looking at him, what does he have next?
He's
Cincinnati,
got Cincy, the Rams, Seahawks, Baltimore, Cleveland. So, the Cardinals have a really hard schedule, but they're exploitable matchups here.
He just did it to the Niners, man. That's and the defense,
Cowboys. Scored 10 points against the Cowboys in week 3.
Yeah.
Scores 26.6 points on Sleeper here in PPR. against the 49ers. That's legit. It really is
Yeah.
legit production.
This is the only guy, in my opinion, that I would spend like really any significant fab on that's under the 35 to 40% threshold. Depending on what your wide receiver room looks like, I'd be comfortable spending in like the 20 to 30% range potentially. This guy looks legit. I don't think this is fool's gold. I don't think, 70% snap share. He's going to be on the field a ton. Josh Dobbs looks like he's going to be the quarterback for the foreseeable future as well. There's really no need for them to rush Kyler back given the play that they're getting from this guy. So, no, Michael Wilson, I don't know. What would you spend on Michael Wilson this week? How comfortable are you in this breakout, or is this more fool's gold to you?
Okay, so that was a good question. I had him a little bit lower than what you had. I had 10 to 20% of fab, but you're at 20 to 30. Yeah. I honestly think I'm more leaning towards your side of it now, considering that a lot of fab has been spent. So 10 to 20 or 20 to 30 really isn't marginally that big of a difference. I think if you've missed out on the Tank Dells, the Pukas, if you've missed out on Kieran Williams, the Devon Achane, I don't know if Michael Wilson's going to return that kind of value, but he is someone in that vein that I would be ultra aggressive with. And I'm comfortable with 20 to 30% of fab. He's locked into 2 wide receiver sets. This Cardinals team is surprisingly frisky. He broke out against an elite 49ers defense. We know that rookies tend to come along as the season progresses, but he's currently wide receiver 32 on the season after 4 weeks. I think he can maintain an upside wide receiver 4 type player and could even explode in the event that the Cardinals are frisky and Kyler actually comes back. I think we're ignoring this case that Kyler does come back and he's good. Now, where I land on this. I personally have believed that Kyler has played his last snap for the Arizona Cardinals. However, they don't look like the worst team in football, and the Texans surely don't look like the worst team in football. So all of a sudden, they were going to have the first 2 picks in the NFL draft next year. That looks a little different through 4 weeks. So maybe it does make more sense for Kyler to come back. So I'm confused on how that'll play out. I think it's changing a little bit. I don't think this team's tanking as once was perceived. I really think they're coached well, and I think Wilson's legit. I got a firsthand experience watching this team. I'm a huge 49er fan, so I watched the Cardinals close up, and Wilson looks great. I'm really confident in him. And yeah, I think 20 to 30% being aggressive. Like, this guy's a 3rd-round pick. Tank Dell was a 3rd-round pick. Josh Dobbs looks really solid. CJ Stroud looks amazing. I think there's some parallels here to Tank Dell. Both guys played in the Senior Bowl. Both guys shined at the Senior Bowl. I would be ultra aggressive with Michael Wilson. And guess what? If you lose out, you lose out. But you lost out on Puka. You lost out on Kyren Williams. You lost out on some of these big name guys. It's time to get aggressive when a rookie pops like that and has their spike week. So yeah, I'm locked in as Michael Wilson being the priority ad this week.
Yep.
Wow, that was. I did not expect to be so passionate about Michael Wilson.
Yeah,
wow.
You were moved by Michael Wilson. I'm watching. That was compelling.
And I'm kind of all in now. I just talked myself into it. You gotta love it. The next guy that I have here, he's rostered at 23%, currently trending as the 9th wide receiver right now on Sleeper as a pickup. Rostered in 23% of leagues. I have Michael Gallup here as a guy that I'm targeting. I drafted Brandon Cooks in a couple leagues this year. Didn't really take him super high by any means, but kind of was like, 9th round dart throw, 10th round dart throw on Brandon Cooks. Wide receiver 2 is going to be valuable in this offense. But through the first 4 weeks, Michael Gallup really is emerging as the wide receiver 2. Brandon Cooks last week was playing in a 28-point blowout with Deuce Vaughn and Jalen Tolbert on the field. So
Not a good look, man.
Yeah, you see Michael Gallup's snap percentage is 53 there. It's because they took him out with CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard when that game was over. They put him on ice. That's how valuable I think they think, and I think that's just an idea of the pecking order with Gallup. He was a little slow to come out of the gates, 2 points, 1.3 points. However, over the last 2 weeks, Gallup is 2nd in targets per route run on the Cowboys, 2nd receptions, 2nd in air yard share, 1st in yak per reception, and the Cowboys are going to be playing in less blowouts soon. Like, this offense is about a print, in my opinion. They have matchups with the Niners, the Chargers, the Rams, the Eagles, the Giants. They're going to have to pass in these games. I don't imagine them blowing out teams by 30 points like they've really done in 3 out of these 4 games. It's just been absolute blowouts. So in an actual game where the Cowboys are losing, trailing in a negative game script, he has 6 catches for 92 yards, which I think is a positive sign for things to come. Historically, Gallup has played well as a wide receiver. He tore his ACL and he's kind of been working his way back. But I think Gallup is a fine stasher. And shout out to Keegan Thompson, who's probably Michael Gallup's second biggest fan outside of his mother. So Keegan was all over this one earlier in the year.
Yeah. I think to your point, me and you saw Brandon Cooks being the number 2, and it's trending in the opposite direction right now. So yeah, I'm with you on Gallup there. The Dallas defense is not going to continue scoring 2 touchdowns a game and like completely taking these Dallas offensive players out of fantasy. So yeah, better times are to come. Good time to buy low. He's available. I think you said in like 80% of leagues.
77% of leagues you can pick up Michael Gallup right now.
Yeah, pretty low. So yeah, no, good time. That's probably a much lower bid. I'm probably not spending more than
5 to 10%
on Michael Gallup.
5 to 10%. No need to be aggressive, but I'm just saying this guy, as the season comes along, could get that Brandon Cooks role that we thought would be valuable. And if that's the case, he should be rostered in all formats. You've made it 10 minutes into this Waiver Wire Target episode. We appreciate you. You have no idea what it means for you to support us and the Regression of the Mean podcast. If you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead, like this video, subscribe, turn on the notifications. All right, Aidan, let's jump back into the video.
I'm going to do the 2 cheat ones real fast, as now that I'm looking at your screen. They are number 2 and 3 there.
Okay.
Jameson Williams is a no-brainer. He is coming off his suspension, so Jameson Williams is back. He has served. No, he has one more, right? No, he has one more. Yeah, that's right. He has one more week left. But yeah, Jameson Williams available in 50% of fantasy leagues. Figures to slot in as the number 2 receiver, probably the number 3 overall passing option, maybe even 4th. But he's absolutely worth a flyer. That's still first-round draft capital and an uber-talented guy. So go get Jameson Williams if he's still available. He's nowhere in any of my leagues, sadly, or else I would be putting bids on him. But Jameson Williams, he's an absolute freak athlete, has had just like an awful go at it in terms of like the start to his career, but they've spent too much on him and they're severely lacking another like serious threat in that offense behind ARSB and Laporta. So yeah, this is a guy that makes a ton of sense to be on your rosters.
This is a great pick, in my opinion, for just pure upside. He might not be anything, he might be something, but it's just a pure upside swing, and it's worth the risk. You have Romeo Doubs as your next one?
Yeah, it's just I was going to talk about him last week. He's now 2 rostered. The dude's been a top 20 wide receiver in 3 out of 4 weeks and has now seen 10 plus targets in his last 2 weeks, but it's only rostered in 60% of leagues. I spoke about it this summer as a potential, as a possibility in this Packers offense that he could be the wide receiver 1. I think he's going to be a far more consistent floor than Christian Watson, whether people like to hear it or not. Christian Watson, we always knew, is our boomer bust guy. He's going to hit the absolute home run ball. But Jordan Love is showing he's very comfortable with Romeo Doubs. Lots of targets, consistent production. This is a guy that we're talking about potentially slotting into your lineups as a wide receiver 3 or 4.
It's wide receiver 16 right now. And that's with Watson out. So big caveat here. But I think your thesis here is that there is room for both of them to eat.
Without a doubt. Jordan Love has performed much better than I think anyone could have expected. And given what we kind of know as Watson's strengths, Romeo Doubs could be the guy that's kind of filling up, in between the 40s, in between the 20s, whereas Watson's hitting your home runs and kind of some of those touchdowns. So, no, I think Romeo Doubs' rostership is still far too low. I think after this week, he'll be 80% plus. There's no reason for him to still be available on rosters at this rate.
12 targets in week 3, 13 targets in week 4. Very curious to see the shakeout.
Super telling of his role.
With Christian Watson back in the fold, Watson was able to get home in a limited capacity. Again, we're recording this on Monday afternoon, so this player has not played yet. But the next guy that I think is worth picking up, and he's only rostered in 12% of leagues, is Wan'Dale Robinson. And you also Jameson Williams, Romeo Doubs, real quick. Fab budget. How do we feel about that? Drop a substantial amount if they're out there.
Correct. Oh, on Dobbs? Or which one?
Probably both of them, right? They're pretty similarly 50% and 60%. You 30% Fab if they're out there.
Yeah, I agree. I do similar bids on them with Michael Wilson.
Okay.
I think those should be like 20 to 30% guys.
Okay.
Those are like real contributors that we've seen now.
Wan'Dale Robinson, rostered in 12% of leagues. This is a guy I'd only really invest around 5% of my total fab on, so not too much. Again, we're recording this 2 hours before Monday Night Football kicks off. This Giants offense needs some juice. Paris Campbell has been pretty dust to start this season. The offensive line hasn't really held up enough for Darius Slayton to hit home on deep shots. This offense has just been kind of a mess through the first 3 weeks of the season. Wan'Dale last season, when he was out there, I mean, the guy was seeing a ton of targets. He didn't play a ton, but he when he got snaps, Daniel Jones was looking at him often. But, the game before he tears his ACL, 13 targets, 9 catches, 100 yards. He comes back on limited snaps in week 3 against the Niners on Thursday night. He plays 22% of the snaps and sees 5 targets. He kind of did his best Alvin Kamara there with 4 catches for 21 yards. It's not going to look super pretty, but in a PPR format, Wan'Dale Robinson's going to be able to get you like 10 to 12 points per game, in my opinion, because considering his short ADOT, considering he's a slot, considering that he wins and gets open, and considering that the Giants offensive line is just not good, and he benefits directly from like Saquon even being out and missing out on dump offs. So I'm very curious to see if he has a really good game and sees more snaps Monday night, when this is when people are going to be watching it after the game, so I might look like a fool. But I just think Wan'Dale's like the perfect guy to put 5% on. And hey, if he's still out there, he'll be locked. I wish I could just add him right now, but I can't. But he's somebody that I'm really curious to see how he does against the Seahawks tonight at home. Kind of a must-win game for the Giants. Do you have any other wide receivers? Because I have 2 kind of quick hitters that are over 34%.
Yeah, I've just got a quick hitter. I think Braxton Barios is actually an interesting one. I think this is more of like an insurance like stash play. He's clearly the number 3 wide receiver in this offense when you look at snaps. Just came off a really productive game, caught all 6 of his targets for 43 yards and a touchdown. If anything were to happen to Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle, this guy becomes extremely valuable. This Miami Dolphins offense is going to continue to hang 20 to 30 points a game. And they're going to be in 3 wide receiver sets where Braxton Barios gets touches. So, again, this is not someone I'm rostering to start. But if you've got the bench and you're maybe just looking to trim a guy, like some of those other guys we talked about, Brandon Cooks or something, I think Braxton Barios makes a ton of sense as like one of your last bench spots.
4% ownership. What do you think? Like 1 to 2% fab?
Yeah, that's
probably
tiny.
going to have to take in a bit.
You might be able to get him for 0.
Other guys that I wanted to talk about, they're actually here in the trending down section, because I just think that they're guys that you maybe should be on the lookout for. The first one is Quentin Johnston. Whole lot of red on this page. It does not look good. He's probably had one of the worst starts you could have in the first 4 weeks of an NFL career. Maybe not worst. He hasn't really done anything terrible. They just really haven't been able to get him going at all. In my notes, I have it's been bad. It's been really bad. But people are going to drop him, and you're just going to need to pick him up. He's 67% roster. They have a bye this week. There are plenty of people that are impatient, going to cut bait, try and add that second quarterback because maybe Justin Herbert's on a bye. Maybe they have who else is on a bye this week that's important? Maybe they have
you got
Geno Smith on a bye, right? Or maybe they have Deshaun Watson and they're looking for a fill-in, right?
Baker. Yeah, those are all guys.
He could be cut. He's played the most percentage of snaps so far in his career with 51%.
Yeah, I was going to highlight that. It doubled this week.
He's going into a bye week, and typically this is a really good week to integrate rookies into the offense, and they can start to create plays for him, start to get him in rhythm. And it's this theory called the post-bye rookie bump. And that could be incoming. So if you have QJ, I'd hold off on cutting him. If you see QJ land on your wire on Thursday or Wednesday when the wires go through, I think he's worth to pick it up. And I would be pretty aggressive, 10 to 20%. I just feel like it's such a good dart throw considering rookie breakouts come later in the season. And I just feel like this is the time to strike if he ends up on the wire. Guy too, and I saw him. I don't know why he's trending down as a wide receiver, but somebody that I'd pick up here is Rashee Rice. So he's only owned in 51% of leagues, but his snap percentage has slowly crept up. This week, 3-snap percentage is a little fugazi because that game was such a blowout. But 46% of the snaps in a close game is a really high degree of confidence here for Rice. He was on the field again for almost 50% of the snaps. On a limited basis, this is where Rashee Rice leads the Chiefs wide receivers. He leads them in targets per route run, yards per route run, receptions, and target percentage. It's insane. That receiving core is terrible. It's desperately needs someone to step up. He's second in target rate only to Travis Kelce. He's had some drops. He looks like a developmental guy, but they might need him to develop sooner rather than later. And I think this is a stash, but he's high upside. I'm willing to go that same 10 to 20%, even more aggressive, 15 to 20%, like kind of in that same QJ range. He's honestly been better than QJ to start, which is kind of crazy. But these are both guys that if you see him on the wire, you should be picking them up. Any other wide receivers you want to shift over to the poo-poo platter that is running back this week?
Yeah, let's go to RB. My list is short. It is short. There is not much out there in the running backs.
Starts with one guy, right?
I think, that's the no-brainer. Yeah. No-brainer here.
Jaleel McLaughlin rostered in 2% of leagues. So I've seen that Javonte isn't going to miss much time. Is that what you've seen too?
Yeah, I've seen it's not serious. I don't even know if he's missing any time.
Okay. So there's two things that we need to factor here for McLaughlin. I want to pick your brain on it. I'd love your opinion. So there's the line of thinking that Javonte will miss a week or two, and McLaughlin slides in as in a 50-50 split with P. Ryan, because P. Ryan will maintain his snap share. But McLaughlin is kind of a higher upside guy than P. Ryan. You should pick him up because he could be like a fringe RB2 flex play for you for 2 weeks. There's also this other side of it that McLaughlin, even with Javonte healthy, commands a higher percent of the backfield, and he's worth rostering regardless, and then makes this the most just an awful back, like 3-headed monster. You can't start anybody. Yeah, just like literally 33% split. You want nothing to do with it. And there's another scenario where McLaughlin takes P. Ryan's spot, and then it's Javonte and McLaughlin, right? So I don't know how it's going to shake out. Those 3 scenarios are on the table here. What do you think is the most likely outcome for this backfield and for McLaughlin?
I'm going to guess it's the first one, if we're being completely honest. I think, obviously, Javonte, when healthy, is going to assume his role. And given the amount of money put into P. Ryan, I find it hard to believe, especially with his third down role. I find it very hard. I think, if anything, you're probably looking at Jaleel taking more of the early carries, but I don't see him taking those from Javonte. But it was it was 10 yards a touch. He had some bursts. He had a couple really nice touches. Take it with a grain of salt against the Chicago defense it's just not very good. This is a guy that we're super high on all offseason. I was actually surprised he didn't get more touches at all. Weeks 1 through 3, which I think would indicate kind of which scenario do we believe it is. And maybe it is that first one that it's just, he's talented, but the 2 guys ahead of him are just better, or they just feel better about him. So he's worth rostering.
He's
for sure.
He's a tiny guy, dude. 5'7", 187. There's probably a reason why he hasn't seen it. That's a tiny running back, man. That's a short guy.
I don't know. This is 5% at most, especially if Javonte misses time. If I'm a Javonte owner, probably I'm trying to get him if not, I don't even know how aggressive I'm trying to get with him. I don't know. A New York Jets defense too. They've been about league average against running backs, but that figures to be a game where, if I had to guess, the Broncos are not going to do a whole lot on the offensive side of the football.
All right, so here is the bulk case for McLaughlin. In week 4, 7 carries, 72 yards, 3 catches, 32 yards, a touchdown on 3 targets. If you compare this with P. Ryan, right? And we're pulling up Samaje P. Ryan's numbers here. P. Ryan, 6 attempts for 12 yards, 2 catches, 2 targets, 23 yards. The Broncos went down in this game 28-7, and they rode a undrafted rookie who is 5'7", 187 pounds in the comeback. He played really well. Javonte Williams is coming back off of the ACL. He hurts his hip. What's the reason to rush Javonte? You can give him a week off, let the rookie spill in. But there's just a situation here where McLaughlin is good and commands a higher percentage of this backfield share. And again, I said P. Ryan's worth cutting, Pirine just hasn't been good this season outside of
Not at all.
11.8 points
It's
in
a
week
bummer.
1 against the Vegas Raiders. So I feel pretty encouraged by 19.4 fantasy points, even in a soft matchup. But with 33% of the snaps, it was a really impressive week from McLaughlin. I'm going to land here on a 5% bid. I think that there is stash upside if you hold on to him for multiple weeks, even if Javonte gets hurt. I mean, the risk of injury for Javonte is pretty huge, considering the injury that he rehabbed over the summer and how fast he came back. And Javonte hasn't looked that great, honestly. So it's not going to be pretty, but this is where we're at. And outside of Wilson, I'd probably put Jaleel here as my number 2 target on the waivers, just because he could, in a weird way, if you like flip a coin a bunch of times, there is a scenario where he's like all of a sudden commanding 50% of the backfield and he's good. So you can't ignore that kind of upside. It probably won't happen. So that's why it's a 5% bid on Fab, but he's worth taking a risk on, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Who else you got?
I'm going to keep going back to the well, and I know it's not sexy at all, but I'm picking up
There he is
I'm picking up Latavius Murray. Latavius Murray's rostered in 11% of leagues. I'm only going to give 3% of my fab. You're not bidding against anyone unless people listen to this podcast and they've heard me show Latavius Murray now for the 3rd week. I will say this. I'm a James Cook owner in I'm a James Cook manager in a decent amount of leagues. So I have a good amount of James Cook rostership, and I now have some bench spots that I think are ready to rotate in a new player. And I think Latavius Murray is such a valuable handcuff right now to James Cook, considering that he's the clear number 2 behind Cook and in front of Damian Harris. Since week 2, he scored 11 points, 9 points, and 7.6 points. You're like, oh, Shaun, that's literally nothing. I get it, but he's only played in 23, 25, and 33% of the snaps. Last week, he averaged 8 yards a carry. He averaged 12 yards per reception. He's just been legit. Like, he lost some of his goal line share to James Cook this week, thank goodness, but he actually gained more snaps in between the 20s, which was interesting. I don't know. This is a pure handcuff bench stash guy, but if anything happens to James Cook, Latavius Murray is easily sliding into like a mid-range, like low end RB2, right? And that's a high quality handcuff right now.
Yeah, completely agree with that.
Do you have any other running backs?
Yeah, the only one I wanted to make note of, which I think we've already highlighted before, is Chuba Hubbard.
That's exactly who I had. Good.
So he actually outsnapped Miles Sanders last week. Miles Sanders' bottom line hasn't been very good this year. He's averaging less than 3 yards a carry. The only thing that's really keeping his value alive is his pass catching ability, which has been fine. It's not like he's doing much better through the air with his receptions, but there's a world where Chuba Hubbard is the running back 1 in this backfield. That offense actually looks better when they run the football, given how Bryce Young is just not quite where we thought he was going to be thus far. And Chuba Hubbard is, he's 30%. What is that? Yeah, 32% rostered. I would absolutely grab him. Again, like I always kind of come back to it, like especially if you're a Miles Sanders owner, because given where you drafted Miles Sanders, if it really happens where, this flips and Chuba Hubbard's taking 70% of snaps at some point, like you're completely out of that kind of draft capital. Whereas you draft Chuba, one of them maybe emerges, one of them figures it out, and then at least you've got the other one. But I don't know. I think Chuba's at least worth it. He shows burst. He's looked better than Miles Sanders this year. This is the back that I would want to own if I had to own either one of them. Low bid again, maybe 5% if that. But
I have a 3%.
Sure.
I have a 3% bid on Chuba. So
yeah,
we featured him in week 1. I called him out as a stash, and he hasn't. He scored 10 points in week 2, did nothing in week 3. This offense is not good, and it's going nowhere fast. Miles Sanders last week went from a full practice to a limited to a DNP to a play, and then played less than 50% of snaps. So he's banged up. We're talking about a guy who the last 2 weeks has had 2 yards per carry and 2.93 yards per carry, all right? The first 2 weeks, he was a lot more efficient on the ground. Miles Sanders has not necessarily been very good. He's been seeing a ton of targets. I think Chuba is a better option right now for the Panthers, considering that Miles Sanders is banged up. And if we're in a situation where it's late in the year and Miles Sanders is, on a 2-year deal essentially with guaranteed money for year 2, he's technically a part of their short-term future. They might be in a situation where they probably just decide to rest him right down the stretch. I know they don't really have much to lose in terms of getting higher draft capital in the first round, but I don't know. This could be a real lost season real fast for the Panthers, and Chuba could be a volume merchant. So he's worth taking a stash on. He's probably one of my lowest priority players out of everyone we've chatted through, but 3%. Now that I'm thinking, if 3% is Chuba and 3% is Latavius, I think I'm down for like 7 to 8% on Jaleel, just like in retrospect. But
Yep. Yeah, I'd rather have him over at those two as well.
it's rough. Headliner, go pick up Michael Wilson. That's the headliner
Yeah.
for this.
The running backs are
episode
tough.
today.
I actually like some quarterbacks
Yeah.
if you want to jump over there. So this is a
He's
guy that
right here. He's right here.
Yeah. No, I'm not doing
Should
it.
I click Mitch Trubisky? Should
I
I do
won't
it?
do it. I can't quit you, Mitchell, but it's nice to see you back. No, this is a guy that I think we were a little too hard on last week in just his 4th NFL start. That has a pretty plus match. Like, I'd consider starting him this week, and that's Sam Howell exactly. Yeah, dude. Take out his nightmare week 3, and he's been QB 11, 14, and 13 on the year. Again, he had started one NFL game coming into this year, and I think we were a bit too harsh on him. The Bills' defense ate him alive. Like, so be it. But his first game last year was pretty good. And again, he absolutely hung punch to punch with that.
You say
With
tongue
that
punch?
Philip-
I thought you were going to say
No.
tongue punch.
No,
Not
no.
safe for work. Aiden.
With that Philly defense. Granted, sure, that defense is not quite as good this year, but you go for 2 and you're looking at a game that Washington absolutely steals on the road in Philadelphia there at the end. So Sam Howell going in on a short week, going back home against an absolutely terrible Chicago defense. This is a guy I'm considering starting this week. I think he's a pretty clear path to a top 10 QB play, given that he also has rushing ability. The Bears have given up the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks. This is a sneaky good play. Given last week, yeah, he's only rostered in 20% of leagues. I'd assume in your leagues this week, this will be the quarterback that will be at the top of people's priority list, given that CJ Stroud is not still available.
Sam Howell has scored again 15 points against Arizona, 21 points against Denver, 0.6 against the Bills, and 19.5 against the Eagles. The Bears have surrendered 21 fantasy points per game to the position, which is 2nd worst. I mean, this is like the ideal Justin Herbert starting a pinch guy, right? I mean, I'm starting Sam Howell over Burrow in a super flex league this week. That's how over Joe Burrow I am. I am not playing Burrow until I see it. So that's where I'm at. I think Sam Howell, you're going to play him in good matchups and probably bench him in bad ones, right? I mean, that's kind of where we're at. The guy can get after it a little bit on the ground. He's had like a decent amount of like attempts, or I don't know. Every time I'm on red zone, it seems like he's scrambling. But last week was his first week where he had over 20 yards rushing. He had 40, so we love to see that in fantasy.
Yeah.
I think he has a relatively safe floor, and we haven't really seen a huge pop week yet. And we said this all along. This Commanders offense just except for the offensive line, which is terrible. They have good receivers and good running backs, and Bieniemy's calling creative plays, and I like it for him.
He's in a good position. He's just in a good position.
He looks better than Kenny Pickett. I'll give him that.
Floor's low.
The next quarterback I have here is Joshua Dobbs.
What a dude.
We highlighted this last week where I was like, I'm a week away from recommending Josh Dobbs as a waiver wire ad. He's rostered in 9% of leagues. And it's Sam Howell next week again for Fab. I'd go 5 to 7%, especially if you have like Justin Herbert and you need a good starter. I'd be semi-aggressive. You got to lock in a win when Herbert's on a bye, right? So I'd be bringing Howell there. Get aggressive. Josh Dobbs rostered in 9% of leagues. I'm at like a 3 to 5% bid. Don't get too crazy. He could turn back into a pumpkin here at really any minute. Has matchups with Cincinnati, the Rams, Seattle, and Baltimore coming up. pretty much everything we highlighted about Michael Wilson, it can kind of apply here to Josh Dobbs in terms of the Cardinals being friskier, their offensive coordinator being a good play caller, the infrastructure being pretty solid. After a week 1 in a game in which he scored less than a single fantasy point, he scored 25 points, 17 points, and 23 points against the Giants, the Cowboys, and the 49ers. That's insane against the 49ers and Cowboys running out that well. In his last 3 games, he's rushed for 41 yards, 55 yards, and 48 yards. I kept waiting for him to throw a pick or take a sack. It never happened. He played really well. He's dialed with this offensive coordinator. I mean, this is crazy, the rushing yards. He's a legit play here. And if you're in a super flex,
sure. He's becoming startable.
He's in a super flex, you're playing him. Like, just straight up, until he proves that he's a pumpkin. The rushing upside alone is so legit. I mean,
he has 2 top 10 finishes. He's 2 top 10 finishes. Like, you have to acknowledge this and put him in your lineup at this point, especially in Superflex. Like, no debate in Superflex. He's in your lineup.
I have a note here. The Cincinnati Bengals, who Josh plays this week 5, they've surrendered 17 fantasy points per game to the position, which is about middle of the pack, about league average. However, they have given up the 4th most rushing yards to quarterbacks this season, the Cincinnati Bengals.
That makes his plays so safe because we're looking at, that's probably 50 yards that I can just pencil in. That's 5-point floor that we're already starting with, in my opinion.
And if he gets in the end zone, he's gonna hit his projection, right? If he scores a rushing touchdown, and did you see that? Okay, I don't know if a lot of people are watching this again because I'm a 49er fan, but I take a shot every time I say that. But they ran the tush push perfectly with him. They converted 3 tush pushes perfectly. Gannon, coming from the Eagles, I guess knows the secret sauce where other guys aren't able to
6'3",
do
dude.
it.
Like he's a big dude. Like you don't want to do it with like small. Like this is a big, strong guy. Like he absolutely works for that.
So yeah, that's who I'm picking up. Do you have another quarterback here before we transition to tight end?
Yeah, I think this guy should get some love, given like he consistently gets shit on, and he's got a pretty awesome matchup this week as well. We've already highlighted the second worst defense against quarterbacks, and it's Zach Wilson.
Oh my goodness! I just clicked on Zach Wilson's name.
I did not recognize what I was seeing in the second half of last night's football game. It felt like they took the training wheels off and kind of let him sling it, and it was working, dude. Like the tools with Zach Wilson have never been the issue. It just feels like he's always making bonehead plays, leaving the pocket too early. But like this dude was standing in the pocket, back shoulder fades. Like it was awesome what he was doing. And yeah, Denver has given up the most amount of points to fantasy QBs. So I don't know. I don't know if you're actually rostering this guy, but given the matchup, given some buys, if you got the stones to start Zach Wilson and he ends up giving you like a 20 or 30 piece, like I'd be victory lapping that one forever. You've got to acknowledge what he did last night. The kid balled out. He outplayed Patrick Mahomes last night.
Yeah, 19 fantasy points that I'm looking at is crazy. He had the rush. He had the 2-point conversion he rushed in. His counting stats were great. Denver is pretty bad. And then, you know what?
League worst.
The Eagles' secondary and linebacking core isn't very good. Now, I'm a little concerned about that pass rush getting home to Zach Wilson. But, if you're able to protect against that Eagles front.
It's a good matchup, man. It's a good matchup.
And I would recommend Baker Mayfield, but because Baker's QB 13 on the season, 16 points, 18 points, 10 points, 22 points. However, he's going on a bye, and then he's coming back, and he's playing Detroit, Atlanta, Buffalo, Houston, Tennessee, Niners. It's kind of a brutal schedule.
It's kind of brutal
for Baker and the Bucks. So I don't know. I feel like but hey, I would have said New Orleans was a tough matchup, and he just had a great game. So he's on standby. He was an ad that we were talking about after his nice week against Chicago. Basically, if you have a player playing Chicago or Denver,
start him.
Wheels
start
up
him
here.
Start him.
For tight end, I only have one, and it's death, taxes, and me recommending Jake Ferguson. He's rostered in 51% of leagues, so it's kind of cheating, but this is where he ranks top 10 in right now in underlying statistics. He's top 10 in air yard share, target percentage, targets per route run, yards per route run, first read percentage, end zone targets, and expected fantasy points. The guy has like elite usage, right? He's currently the tight end 8. He scored 14.7 fantasy points in week 4 in an absolute blowout. he's going to explode soon enough. And the Cowboys are going to stop playing these candy-ass games. They actually have the second hardest remaining schedule of any team in the NFL down the stretch. So we're actually going to get to see the Cowboys' real offense come to play where they're not up 3 scores. And again, 51% of leagues, it's cheating. It's over 35%. He's only started in 27% of sleeper leagues. But go pick up Jake Ferguson. The guy has been a bucket to start, and I think he'll only continue that way.
Yeah, we will not stop pushing Jake Ferguson until he's like 80% owned because his usage, like you said, is ridiculous. I'm going to cheat as well, just to take us home here, and that's Cole Kmet. I think that was one of the most positive things we saw out of yesterday's game script through the first 3 quarters was people kind of forgot. Cole Kmet was tight end 8 last year. Like through the last 3 quarters of the season, the dude was legit. He scored 7 touchdowns and showed serious chemistry with Justin Fields. If we get anything like this game script that we saw again early on in the game, Cole Kmet is probably a startable tight end, man. He got 7 of 9, 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like that's one of the best tight end performances by quite a bit this year, given the tight end position has been disgusting.
He's now tight end 3 after that week 4 for.
It's silly.
He scored 9 points week 1, 7.8 points week 2, 4.2 points week 3, 27 fantasy points week 4. Yeah. He is now tight end 3 on the season.
It's time to get him back on rosters. Again, he's 57%. That's just about half of leagues. But yeah, he was a huge starter for Justin Fields last year. And
you nailed it.
Yesterday.
He had, whenever Fields was dialed last season as a passer, it was throwing the ball to Cole Kmet. And you saw that this week where they actually have a little bit of a chemistry. And I love how animated he gets when he scores a touchdown. He does the home run smash celebration.
So sweet.
And the only reason we know that is because the guy scores a ton of touchdowns. So I love it. They just signed him to a contract. He's a part of the plans for the foreseeable future. So, yeah, I like that pick. If Cole Kmet's out there, you could do way worse.
Way worse, given what we've seen this year.
Who do they play? They play Washington, Minnesota, Las Vegas, the Chargers. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty cake upcoming schedule.
It's pretty cushy in terms of defense. They'll probably lose them all, but Cole Kmet's going to keep scoring.
Before we get out of here, defenses on the rise. It's not showing me available defenses.
I don't think they have it in trending.
It'll show up in all. Let me see here. Defenses on the rise for this week. I like Detroit. They are the number 10 overall fantasy defense so far. 9 points against KC, -1 against Seattle, 17 against Atlanta, 13 against Green Bay. They get Bryce Young in week 5, Tampa Bay in week 6. Baker's been good, but I kind of like that matchup for them. Other ads that I think are worth it at defense when I'm out here looking at the wire. The Jacksonville defense is owned in. They're playing. No way. They're no chance. For
Never mind.
Jacksonville. I'm trying to see what else. I think the Lions are really the only defense I would be trying to stream next week. Right? Do you have any other ones?
If Washington's out there, I'd consider it.
Yeah, Washington's out there against Chicago. Denver against the Jets.
I'm probably not doing that. I'm actually definitely not doing that.
These aren't great. Maybe if Aidan O'Connell's playing Green Bay, I'm interested in.
I'd say Lions and Manders, and then hopefully you've got something
I'd
better
say
on your
Lions. Team. I think the Lions are the preferred one. I would,
for sure. Yeah, against Bryce Young.
3 to 4% on the Lions.
Yeah.
In terms of fab, but that's gonna do it. Also, I apologize. I recommended Matt Gay and Chase McLaughlin last week as kickers. That's why you don't recommend kickers. However, I have a absolute money kicker. It's Brett Maher. They kick so many field goals on the Rams. So he missed 2, but hit 3 and a bunch of extra points. That team's always moving the ball. So yeah, that's it, man. That is a full comprehensive waiver wire show with drops, injury coverage, bye week suggestion fill-ins. Fab bids. Is anybody doing it better right now in terms of?
Yeah, we gave a couple extra bits this week, man. We kind of got you a couple little bonus bits.
Aidan, before we jump, anything you got to say?
Nope. Need 20 points from K9 tonight. So Kenneth Walker, let's get that explosive ass in the end zone, man.
I need him to score less than 15 to hold on.
Dang it! All right,
Yeah,
well,
we're kind of at odds.
at least one of us will win.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe both
There
of us
might be a
lose.
terrible way where we both lose. Actually, that's worst case scenario. It's the Zach Charbonnet game. We actually need a decent performance out of Kenneth Walker and Daniel Jones to secure the dub in Scottish Bowl. So it's pros and cons here. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Before you jump, you've made it 10 minutes into this Waiver Wire Target episode.